इसी कड़ी में क्रिटिकल एग्जामिंग के लिए पुस्तक के मैं डॉक्टर प्रियंका झा जी, असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ पॉलिटिकल साइंस, मैं आमंत्रित करता हूं।
Thank you, Sunkar sir. Before I start, I would just request the audience. I know it is very difficult. This is the last session. It's been a long day, but I will try to make it interesting in the sense of the larger conference. But I would also request you for your attention for this 20-25 minutes that I have sort of sketched my critical reading of the text. It is very obvious that what is a political scientist doing amongst the historians? But as you would know that political science has many subfields, and one of the fields that I work in, I specialize in and I've been trained in is history of ideas, is history of political thought. And I think that is my entry into reading this text. So I would be reading this text as a political theorist, but also as a person who's interested in thought, who's also interested in how institutions come about and how there is the precursor of this period of the 18th, very interesting 18th century that this text unpacks for us. Because as before me, Professor was speaking about, the history of anti-colonial struggle. It doesn't start with 1857, but there's a longer history in which he's invoking Savarkar, and I'm thinking about 1907, his book, which is called The First War of Independence, in which Savarkar is actually arguing that the history of colonial past is rather problematic because 1857 should not be seen as a sporadic revolt that was happening in different parts of the country, but there was a certain kind of organization and scheme. I think one of the most important interventions of this book is to sort of trace, as we've had a lot of book discussions around this text, and I had the opportunity to be part of the conversation, and I was basically arguing about how this book is a great intervention in terms of the nationalist history, in terms of the local history, the regional history, but most importantly, the history of this little history, the micro history, which many a times is lost in the meta-narrative. So it's not 1885 with Congress emerging as the vantage point of the nationalist struggle, but it takes us to Banaras and position Banaras significantly in the larger map of the nation in terms of what happens here. The history of Banaras, its entanglement with the history of Awadh, its entanglement with Bengal, and most importantly, the interventions which are emerging in the larger narration, whether we want to take the conservative historiography that you have in the writings of people like Radha Mukund or Savarkar, or the nationalist historiography of Bipin Chandra Pal, or the Marxian history of P.C. Joshi or Kosambi, or for that matter, I would also like to bring the feminist history here. So before I really start looking at it critically, I will take 5 minutes for me to sort of unpack how did I read this text, what is important, what is significant, how does it help, and there are many scholars, young scholars. I mean, I can't take the courage because to sort of tell my colleagues, my senior and my esteemed colleagues, as to how do we read a text critically, but it might be useful for all of us to sort of see that how from an intellectual history perspective one can look at this text critically, and I'm taking both the textual and the contextual approach, very significantly laid out as politics of hermeneutics. So I'm going to use the methodology of hermeneutics to sort of interpret this text and see what are the missing gaps. But before I come to the gaps, I would want to quickly flag, as I said, that there are these brilliant 7 chapters which lays out the history of Banaras. It lays out history of Purvanchal. I mean, at so many occasions while you're reading this text, you feel this is our very own Game of Thrones. Mirzapur has come much later, but if you've really seen the Game of Thrones series or the most famous book, which is the Song of Fire and Ice, you see that's happening here in Purvanchal. What is happening here? How is Jaunpur being involved in all of this? How is Buxar, Bihar being involved? How is Awadh being involved? So it also gives you a lens into looking at how there are these tensions within the Awadh family, within the Nawab family, how it is entangled with the clashes and claims happening within the family, the royal family amongst the four descendants of four big families, and also how there are these alliances. So what is interesting are the strategies and negotiations. The negotiations which are happening between the Awadh and the Banaras family with the different stakeholders, but also how are they collectively sort of negotiating with the British Raj? How the British have to take, even if they want to ignore, there's a point that they have to come here and they have to engage and sort of resolve the situation here, or understanding very well the kind of power, the kind of influence that this region, Banaras, would kind of eventually wield in their larger consolidation of power. So, as a scholar of history, when we read, we just hear about the Treaty of Allahabad and the annexation of Awadh. But what is really happening before that? What is happening in that? Where is Banaras placed in that? So when we are talking about Kashi Vaibhav, Banaras is absolutely important even in British consolidation of power. But when we talk about British, there's so much of the Bengal-centric and Delhi-centric discourse of British consolidation that these little histories are lost. And I think these little histories are absolutely unpacking in terms of understanding the weapons of the weak, the resistance. We all talk about Foucault, we all talk about James Scott, weapons of the weak. But what was really happening? How was Jagat Singh in a position to sort of consolidate and get the kind of support? Is it simply the support which is happening in terms of the caste identity? Is it happening in terms of a freedom, the autonomous selfhood identity, or there's much more? So I think that is something that becomes absolutely important, that how did a person like Babu Jagat Singh in a very short span of time managed to create an entire cohesive mechanism of resistance to get that kind of weaponry, to get that kind of resources within a very short period of time, and also becoming a problem for British colonizers. The kind of letters which are going on, the kind of schemes which are being made, who should be deposed, who should not be deposed, is something which is absolutely fascinating. So the history of a nation state is not just through the meta-history, is not through the grand narrative. It is also the smaller, the micro-histories that becomes absolutely fascinating. Right? And also, this whole thing of people's history, I think this is very much a people's history, because nobody in the sense that, I was trying to look at bibliography and I was trying to understand what is really the state of affairs with regard to writing on the provincial history of Banaras, with regard to British Empire, with regard to consolidation of British Empire, is skewed, is minuscule. And I think that is something that at least the history departments of this region, whether it is Banaras Hindu University or all the other state universities, which is the onus is on us to sort of uncover. Right now, it is the effort of the research committee and the family that decided to unearth and do this arduous work of 5 years of getting the documents for us. They've actually shown us how they've managed to do this. I think this needs commendation, because this kind of research is not happening in the university, should be happening in the university. So I think that is important. And then, the other thing with which I would want to start my critical sort of intervention and reading is, like in the history of ideas, we have two major approaches. One is the textual approach and the other is the contextual approach. So the textual approach, so if I want to think of Babu Jagat Singh, if I want to use Jagat Singh as a thinker, as an actor in this larger context, how do I read his life? So this text is helpful because it takes me to the important historical events which are associated with his life, his action. His life becomes a text, because many a times, because from the perspective of the gendered intellectual history, when I work with women thinkers, there are many women thinkers that you don't find much written about. So how do their lives in itself, unka jeevan hai, this is the kind of argument that we've used for Buddha also. We've used for Gandhi, when Shahid Amin talks about Gandhi as Mahatma, or Bill Grami's work on Gandhi, they are emphatic on the fact that, many a times when you don't have the sources, is there a possibility to read the lives of a thinker as a text? And I think I would want to use that as a methodology, this as a text. So the text tells you about the context, but many a times The context also tells you about the text. So the context of this consolidation, this power struggle which is happening, this sangharsh which is happening also tells you about Babu Jagat Singh and also his sort of alliances, his network, people who supported him, and the relationship that kind of emerges between the deposed Awadh Nawab. I've made an entire family chart because every time it really helps me is Mirza Wazir Ali and his claims towards the end. So this being that this actually passes the hermeneutical enterprise. So the text is able to uncover certain truth. The text is able to tell us about the context, and the context also aids me in understanding what is happening. But there are 5 points with which I would want to sort of bring attention, which I read as the missing gaps in this text. Firstly, the structure of the book. So with regard to the ease of reading a text, so many a times the chapters would sort of flow into the other chapter and you kind of get a continuous history. But in this book, I realized that the 7 chapters are absolutely important, but the placement of the chapter needs to be reshuffled. The chapters have been successful in terms of giving me an understanding of the Mughal history, the Banaras history, as well as the Awadh history. So I am at the same time, I think that's also the strength of a book, that this wide canvas of 3 major sort of points of attention are sort of woven together. So the story emerges brilliantly. But then the problem is that these are the structural problems. So for instance, the Vanshavali should have come right in the beginning. Because then what is happening is that, you start the story and then you're going right in the middle, because the Vanshavali, which is absolutely wonderful and makes things very, very easy for the reader, but the Vanshavali is right in the middle of the book. So it would have been better that right in the beginning, if the Vanshavali, the family tree, could have been sort of elaborated, so that then the kind of question that Professor raised, whether Mansab, the 4 brothers, Mansab Ram is very much part of the entire story that we are weaving here. So that really helps. And also this helps in the ease of reading the text. So now the other major point is, so there is a very important history of the Buddhist recovery of Sarnath, the kind of claims which have been made against Babu Jagat Singh as a vilifier. Instead, this book is very important in terms of tracing the indigenous role in preservation of the Buddhist shrines. So I think this is very important intervention. It requires a book in itself, because somehow we really need to question the claims of all these British agents in giving us our dharohar. They came across it, they chanced upon it, but I think giving the entire credibility to Cunningham, I think is an error. And this book becomes absolutely important in terms of rectifying that historical error. Somehow, we as Indians, we have this very this notion that till the time something is here, and once it is recognized by the West, by the imperialists, we are like, yeah, this is all great. So, if someone in Oxford or Cambridge or in Harvard would write something on Jagat Singh's role in the Buddhist preservation, the whole world would be giving attention. We are saying this here, that it is not, and it also helps us. आजादी का अमृत महोत्सव की बात की है, तो हमको ऐसे और भी ऐसे लोकल हीरोज हीरोइंस को ढूंढने की जरूरत है, जिन्होंने इन धरोहर को बड़े अच्छी तरीके से संभाल के रखा और हमको दिया. So I think it is very important that, our custodianship, our claims are being legitimized, but the way in which it just comes abruptly as chapter number 3, if I'm right. So it should either come towards the end, or we need an entire, because there's a story which is going on about the consolidation. When I'm talking about the structure of the book, and all of a sudden there is this important story of Babu Jagat Singh's role in the excavation and preservation of Sarnath. So I think it requires a book in itself. I think somebody should do that research. If I was in the history department in ancient India, I would have encouraged that research. So the Buddhist expedition and the role of the Indian ruler should come. And the third major argument is with regard to the uncritical reading of Jagat Singh. So I think this book really requires a biography, intellectual biography of Babu Jagat Singh in terms of tracing his life, because it starts, there are only 2 pages, page number 40 and 41, which is talking about his training in Persian, his rule and his early life, and then it's completely focused on what he's doing. I think it really requires for us to trace the life, training and evolution of Jagat Singh. How was he as a young boy? How was he as a young zamindar? What were the things which were happening? What were the alliances that he was making? For us to make sense that later in 1790, when the revolt, the precursor of the revolt is happening and that outright uprising is happening, it becomes very important for us to uncover, understand the life of Jagat Singh, because then there is this problem that we can use our 21st century understanding and try to understand the intention of what Jagat Singh was saying, what Babu Jagat Singh was like. He was kind-hearted and everything. And okay, I will just finish with the last argument with regard to the objective assessment, because many a times this is also a personal thing. If I was to write something, many a times this is a problem that I also face when I engage with women thinkers and writers, that Priyanka, you are not looking at them particularly. You're not looking at the gaps. You're not looking at, probably you're reading too much. You're assuming too much. You're assuming that maybe Mahadevi was all this amazing, but maybe she had her own sort of challenges. So also the objective sort of assessment becomes absolutely important. And the last argument is the subaltern argument, sir. I mean, I can't not talk about it, because right now we know the history. It's a top history. We know about the princely state. We know about the rulers. There is a lot of critique of the British oppression. There's a lot of critique of the kind of exploitative mechanisms, how they were acquiring things, how they were asking for more and more, how they were asking for more elephants, how they were asking for more horses. So this is a history of exploitation to which Jagat Singh was resisting. But I'm curious, and I'm not placing this to Babu Jagat Singh, but the entire zamindari state, the class, how were they trying to get their own sort of resources? Was it as simple that you go and you ask for the car and they will give? So there's also the need to have a certain kind of critical understanding as to how the peasants were reacting. How were they reacting to this whole enterprise? Because obviously there is pressure. There's pressure from the colonizer that you have to produce. But then how are they meeting out their requirements? What is their relate? So that also gives us a very interesting sense into the material history. And also in the first chapter, we start with the spiritual nature of, so obviously it's very interesting, of Banaras. We have so much work on Banaras as the spiritual haven. And then we move to Chris Bailey. What is happening in the middle period? What is happening? What about the literature? What about the historical work which has happened from ancient? It's what is happening like from say 5th, 6th century to the 18th century, and it just is abrupt. So as a reader, I would be interested in understanding how are things happening, but nevertheless, this is a great intervention. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this book, and I would just like to use this opportunity to thank the organizers, Satyapal sir, Seema ma'am, Sonkar sir, Ghanshyam sir, everyone from the history department for giving a political scientist a chance to read the text personally. Thank you.
निश्चित तौर पे बाबू जगत सिंह जी को हम लोग इस काशी वैभव अंतर्राष्ट्रीय सेमिनार में उस पुस्तक पर विचार विमर्श कर रहे हैं, और यह विचार विमर्श केवल काशी तक ही नहीं, पूरे भारत होते हुए लगभग कई देशों के लोग इस अंतर्राष्ट्रीय सेमिनार में ऑनलाइन भी जुड़े हुए हैं। तो निश्चित तौर पर आप देखें कि बाबू जगत सिंह जी को विदेशों में भी याद किया जा रहा है।